Reference Librarian at the Worcester branch of the Wayne County Public Library, and today I am reviewing The Forest of Vanishing Stars by Kristin Harmel. So this book came out last year, and it centers around a young woman named Yona. Now, when Yona was only 2 years old, she was kidnapped by Yarusha, who is an 82-year-old who kind of has dreams and premonitions, and one of those told her that kidnapping Yona would not only save Yona's life, but it would save the lives of many others. So Yarusha is a really interesting character, and I would have loved to have read more about her background, especially. She had this sort of ESP, like I mentioned. She just knows things. Like, for example, right away she knows she's going to die when she's 102, and it'll be the spring. So, anyway, Yona is kidnapped. Now, her parents are not bad to her. They loved their daughter. They could have provided a very comfortable life. But her father especially is a big fan of an up-and-comer at the time named Adolf Hitler. So Yarusha maybe had a not great way of doing it, but, did get Yona out of at least that kind of life. So Yarusha raises Yona in the forest of, kind of on the border between Poland and Belarus, and even the author admits, most of this would be considered present-day Belarus, but at the time it was Poland, so that neck of the woods, literally. So, of course, she raises Yona to live off the land in the forest, teaches her how to forage for mushrooms and fruit, how to hunt and fish, how to stay hidden, of course. But she also raises her in a kind of a modified version of the Jewish religion, and really stresses the need to trust God. So that's how Yona is raised, in addition to typical schooling subjects. So Yarusha does teach her, even in the middle of the forest, foreign languages, other countries, and how to find them on a map, and obviously how to read and write, and so on. Above all, the number one lesson is the forest will always protect you. Now, the forest is still a really safe place when World War II begins. Yarusha and Yona can hear gunfire and bombs, but it's in the distance, and they haven't seen any violence yet. They have seen a few soldiers and men wandering through the forest, and Yarusha, of course, warns Yona to not approach them. Now, eventually, Yona is left alone when Yarusha's prediction comes true, and she passes away at the age of 102 in the spring of 1941. So this is the first time Yona has ever been completely alone in her life. She's 22 years old. She's only ever lived in the forest except for those first 2 years with her birth parents. And before she dies, Yarusha does tell Yona about her birth parents and that she was kidnapped for a higher purpose, which is quite shocking, as you might imagine if you were in her shoes. So, Yona is kind of setting the course of living like Yarusha taught her to, until she observes a group of hungry-looking people in the forest, and they're pretty helpless from her observations when it comes to living off the land. And despite Yarusha's voice in the back of her head telling her to stay away from people, she approaches one of the young men who is trying unsuccessfully to fish and shows him what to do. Now, his name is Alexander, and eventually she allows him to introduce her to the rest of his group. And they happen to be Jewish refugees who have escaped from a nearby ghetto, and they fill Yona in on kind of what's been happening in the world and how Jews are being treated, and she's, of course, appalled. So she decides to stick with them and finds that she can teach them the ways of the forest and how they can survive under its cover. I really appreciated the fact that as the war wages on in the background, this story still really focuses on Yona and the people she meets desperately fighting for their lives. Now, at one point, and I won't give away too many spoilers, but after reeling from a betrayal, Yona ventures into a nearby German-occupied village. And there, her past collides with her present in a really devastating way when she actually meets her birth father. And spoiler, he's still not a very nice guy. And he recognizes her by the fact that she has a dove-shaped birthmark on her wrist, and actually the word Yona in Yiddish means dove. So Yerusha had renamed her. And then she also has heterochromia, which is where you have two different colored eyes. So her birth father does recognize her. I'm not going to give away anything when it comes to the reunion, but let's just say blood does not necessarily mean you think the same way. So while she's in the village, Yona also, in addition to, of course, helping all these people in the forest, she helps this group of nuns save a Jewish child's life. It was an especially moving series of chapters, and I almost cried while reading it, especially when you discover that, like, what ultimately happens to these nuns. Now, the nuns in this novel are totally kick butt. They're only around for a couple of chapters, but they were really cool. And they actually are based on real-life nuns who are now collectively known as the Martyrs of Nowa Gruda, which is in Poland, I believe. Now, as mentioned, the concept of the story is actually based on true events, though Yona and Yerusha, they are not real people. The author's notes at the end are pretty extensive, but they're also really good if you want to read those. Kristin Harmel definitely does her research. She interviewed a 93-year-old survivor of one of the forest groups. And it's just a really interesting look at something that happened during World War II that we don't always hear about. Now, if you read this book and you like it, or you've already read it and you enjoyed it, you might want to check out the film Defiance. It's an older movie that came out in 2008, but it's got Daniel Craig and Liev Schreiber in it. And it is actually also a completely different story, but about one of the larger forest groups in Belarus. So that was The Forest of Vanishing Stars. If you like historical fiction, if you like kick-butt women, definitely check out this book and have a wonderful day.